So I'm here with boxing commentator Paul Upham. Paul, it was a surprising result for many on the weekend. Bakhram Murtazaliev, a $6 outsider, springs an upset against Tim Tszyu. Your initial reaction?
Well, Buckram's a lot better than a lot of people thought he was. It was no surprise to him and his team. And I think he showed, he's a very quality world champion. He's definitely up there in the division as one of the best in the division. And, he won the fight very easily. And as you said, it was a big upset and a big shot. I guess that's probably the high esteem that many of us hold Tim in and what he's achieved so far. But, it just shows that at the very elite level, the margins are very slim. And it didn't take much for Bakhram to extinguish himself. And, there were some pretty brutal knockdowns from Tim. It was clear he was clearly the better man on the night, as Tim, willingly said afterwards.
Surprised that Tim Tszyu sort of wanted to walk Bakhram down from the opening bell. I mean, a lot of people thought that he'd box and sort of, size up Bakhram for the first few rounds and get him late. What did you make of Tim's execution of his game plan?
I was interested because in the video I'd seen of Bakhram, he was very aggressive and he wanted to dominate middle ring. And Tim was taking that position. But that's what Tim normally does. Even though early on in the rounds, Tim doesn't throw a lot of punches normally, he still likes to come forward and try and take that center ring position. So I was interested when he did that. Looking back on Tim's career now, there's one mistake he's constantly made is he's probably been too aggressive. And that's been reflected on the one thing that Costa, his father, has always said to him, don't get hit. He said it in the lead up to this fight, don't get hit. And I think, that when he made his American debut, he got dropped in the first round. He came back and won the fight. He probably has been too aggressive and not used the defensive skills that he has in his arsenal. He's never been a one-punch knockout artist. Nikita's more of a knockout puncher than Tim always be. Tim was more of a technician. Tim was a volume puncher. So, I think the interesting thing for me was what Bakhram said through his interpreter after the fight. He said that they practiced the same combinations over and over again. And the first two knockdowns came from left hooks. So they clearly saw in video that Tim was being a bit sloppy and not bringing his right hand back to protect his chin. And they obviously timed him with those left hooks, and they worked perfectly, those two left hooks that got Tim down. And the margins, as I said, were so slim, could have been the other way. But, they obviously had a plan, and Tim's defence wasn't up to standard. And, maybe he was a little bit over-aggressive, as I've seen through his career, that he probably has taken too many punches. So, certainly the defence-wise, that's something that going forward, if he continues, he needs to work on.
A lot of calls over the last couple of days. Tim's had to change people in his team, change his corner. You've been around the zoos for decades now. What do you make of those sort of comments?
Look, from a loss that looks that bad, as I said, the margins are pretty slim. Like, Tim's a really good fighter. And another thing the Backram's team said, they said before and after the fight, they said, we knew Tim doesn't get tired. He fights at a very fast pace. His fitness is excellent. He's got very good boxing skills. And I think the thing we keep forgetting here is that, Tim's still really a novice. He had like 30-odd fights as an amateur. Then he stepped away from boxing at 16 or 17 for 4 or 5 years. He kept on breaking his hands all the time and having hand problems, and he got sick of it. So he gave it away and wanted to concentrate on his schooling. And it was only at the age of 21, he went and saw the Creed film, I believe, and came out and decided he wanted to give boxing a go. He didn't want to have regrets of not trying it. So, he's had 26 professional fights now. He's still a rather amateur. Like, Costa had nearly 300 amateur fights, became world amateur champion. So, I still think that Tim's got a lot of development ahead of him. And, as far as changing trainers, Igor's a very good trainer, but they use the zoo boxing system that was developed by, Costa and Johnny Lewis and with Igor there as well. So, I don't think that they need to change too much. Like, there's this natural reaction, the world's falling in, it's a terrible loss, and it was a terrible loss. The one thing that I would suggest to Tim is that you're not far away. You're a very good fighter. Is that you'd probably just need to spend more time with Dad, with Costa, working on his defence. because I don't think that his boxing skills, as far as his offense, his punching skills are fine. His fitness is excellent. The one thing that's letting him down is his defense. And that's always been the case. He's always taken too many punches, throughout his career. I've always thought he's been a little bit over aggressive, and he's tried to walk through guys. And you can't do that at the elite level. So, I wouldn't be changing too much at all. I'd just be tweaking a few things in defense. And if there's one person that can help him, it's certainly his father.
What did you make of Costa's involvement during fight week? He was there on fight night, but we didn't see him. Do you think if he was in that corner, what would he have said to Tim at the end of round two there?
Well, he would have just said, "Stop! You're getting hit." He would have said the same thing. I thought Costa handled it very well because it was obviously a very emotional thing for him to be there after such a long period of time, and there's reasons for that. But I know Tim was happy for him to be there, and Costa was certainly very happy to be there. So, and some people were saying, "Oh, that was the reason Tim lost." No, that's certainly not the reason Tim lost. And Tim trained for months in Las Vegas getting ready for this fight. Tim trains as hard as anybody in professional boxing. So, you know, I think it's good having a gap there with Costa not being in the corner. I think Igor's a more settled voice there, and it's a voice of reason. He knows Tim. Tim knows him. I wouldn't be changing that, and certainly Costa's not in the situation where he can be full-time trainer. I don't think he wants to be the full-time trainer. I don't know that Tim wants him as the full-time trainer. I just think he needs to maybe. They had that training session in Thailand, and before the fight, he was talking about Nikita and maybe Tim doing some more training camps with him, whether it's in Russia or Thailand or Australia or somewhere else. So that's what I would be advising. Not that they have to listen to me, and not that I know too much about boxing when it comes to the Tszyu family, but yeah, where else are you going to go to get that sort of insight that Costa has, and really it's his defense. The one thing that needs to be tightened up is defense. Now, mentally and emotionally, yes, it's going to be very hard for Tim to overcome this loss because, Tim's confidence levels were so high. And to be an elite fighter, you have to have that confidence that you can beat anybody in the world at any time. And if you haven't got that confidence, well, you can't fight at the elite level. So Tim's really going to struggle for this loss, and he's going to break down and analyze everything. He's a very smart guy, a very intelligent guy. So I think that there will be a review of all things, but with Tim, I wouldn't be changing too much because I said he's close. It seems to be he was totally blown away and it was such a bad loss. But I think we're underestimating how good a fighter Bakhram is. He's a really really top line world champion.
Mm. You've seen Costa's career here. Obviously, had that loss to Vince Phillips. Is this Tim's Vince Phillips moment? Are there any sort of comparisons between these two fights?
I don't know if many people know this, but Costa had changed his diet and his preparation and lead up to that Vince Phillips fight. I know he never gave excuses, but I think there was something to that. And I think it helped Costa understand he needs to take everything a bit more professionally. And he always said, I'll always thank Vince Phillips for making me a better fighter. The comparison I'd be looking for Tim would more be Vladimir Klitschko. He was beaten a couple of times badly, knocked out badly, and his own brother Vitaly sort of suggested maybe he needs to retire. And I think he was 27 or 28 at the time, and he retooled, came back, had some wins, and he went on to have a very long 10-year reign as heavyweight world champion. So it can be done. As I said, Tim, he can't just break everything down and start again. He's got everything that he needs there. He just needs to fine-tune a few things and get his confidence back. Come back to Australia, and have some training camps, have a couple of wins, and then see what's out there because, right now in America, there's no big fights for him. He's going to have to rebuild his career because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, he's a nobody. He's not as good as Costa is ever going to be. And that's selling, Costa short. Costa's one of the all-time greats, undisputed champion. So it was always going to be very hard for Nikita and Tim to live up to that expectation. He's still got time. Maybe he might shock us. Maybe he might turn around and say, okay, well, I've done everything I can do. I'm going to retire. But I don't think that's Tim. I think he'll want to give it another go and try and change a few things. And, I think the opportunity is there for him to do it, but he's going to have to, overcome, I think, the emotional and the mental thing of going through those two losses back to back. And I did say in the lead up to the fight, I said, a lot of pressure on Tim, because if he has another loss, people are just going to discard him and say that he's never as good as his father and he's back in the pack. And then boxing, you've got to win all the time to stay on top. So, but if he comes back and looks good and has a couple of credible wins and beats somebody in the top 10, he can earn his way back into a world title fight and then, prove himself. But, he's got to do a bit of hard work now, but he's got to work out, okay, what's the plan going forward?
What does you think that Fondora fight impacted Tim? We saw in the round one, he sort of rubbed his head there and looked for blood. Do you think that has mentally impacted Tim at all?
I just think there was a head clash there, and he was thinking, "Oh no, not again." And he was just trying to be sure that there was definitely no blood. So, it looked a little bit unusual, and maybe that was just him being a bit overcautious after that. Because it was a bad cut. It was a really, really bad cut. Um, to lose that much blood, and to fight so well and lose the fight on points. It's probably a fight he could have won. We don't know for sure if he doesn't have the cut, but it was going okay early on. But you never know for sure. Fundora is a very good fighter. So, as I said, that Tim has so much confidence as a fighter. He has that unbelievable self-belief. And, there's a lot of criticism in boxing these days about the best guys not fighting the best guys. Well, one thing with Tim, you always be sure he was going to make the best fights out there. He was going to try and take the biggest and best fights out there. But to go from a point where you're, possibly fighting a Terence Crawford or a Saul Alvarez or an undisputed title fight, a rematch with Fundora, and then to have this loss, I described this before a number of times that, we all go to work and we do our jobs and we go on with our lives. But with these elite boxers, their whole careers and their whole lives can just spin on the outcome of one fight where they're going on to, multi-million-dollar paydays and now they're just back in the pack. So it must be terribly hard emotionally and mentally to handle that because, Tim's mentality is he's going to win this fight and he's going to move on to more world title fights and become undisputed champion. So that would be so, so hard, and I feel for Tim having to go through that. But, that's part of the sport, and I guess that's what you accept.
What does he do now? There's talk of domestic fights. Does he come back and fight here? Does he fight on undercards overseas? What are you thinking he'll do?
Well, he can't fight for 3 to 4 months anyway because of the knockout. So we won't see him until what, March, sort of March, April next year, and that'll hurt Tim because he likes to fight regularly. He hated only fighting twice this year. He likes to fight 4 times a year. I think the natural thing is to come back and fight here in Australia. There's always been talk about the Michael Zarafa fight. Michael Zarafa was talking it up this week, saying, I told you Tim wasn't as good as you all thought he was. Well, so that's a marketable fight. Does he get any offers to fight overseas? He'll probably still have training camps overseas. If he fights here in Australia, people will watch. It depends on what his promoter wants to do, what they want to do as far as putting a promotion on here in Australia and, how many tickets can they sell and what venue would they have it at. So I think there's options here, but I think no doubt he'll go and have a training camp overseas somewhere, whether it's with his dad or somewhere else, and do what he normally does. I can't see him changing too many things, like Tim Tszyu's Tim Tszyu. He's not going to change too many things the way he does them already. And, he's done things really well. It's so easy to criticize fighters. In these events, someone's got to lose and someone's going to win. And Bakhram had a good win. Now, what does Tim change, as I said, to come back? What does he change and do differently? So, I don't think you're going to see things too differently from Tim. The main thing would just be concentrating on trying to tighten up his defense. But, his promoter will give him options, and then ultimately Tim will make a decision on whether he fights here or overseas.
Last one. It's not all doom and gloom. There are some other guys out there making noise. Jai McAllister, Liam Paro, Cambosis, the Maloney boys. Australian boxing's got some other stars that are making an impact.
Yeah, well, look, Jai McAllister has been doing really, really good, and he doesn't get much notice here in Australia. He's been fighting over in Saudi Arabia, but he's had some really good wins and impressive wins, and I think he's going to continue to do that. And, Liam Paro's got a chance now to go. He's going to go back and defend his title for the first time back in Puerto Rico, so that's a great opportunity for him. But hopefully he can bring back the world title belt and win again and come in here and defend it in Australia. And that's what we need, like Tim Tszyu's going to be retooling for a while and see how he goes. But, yeah, we need some other guys to step forward because, without them, even in female boxing, Ebony is doing really well as well overseas, and Sky Nicholson's doing really well. So, Australian boxing needs winners and world champions from this point going forward, to keep the sport alive. And, we rely on sort of one-off events. We can't never compete with the marketing power of cricket and NRL and AFL. So it's one-off big fight events which keep the sport going and keep the interest. So, yeah, we need world champions, and we need guys like, Liam Paro and Joe Abatai to come back and defend their world titles here in Australia, and other guys to step up and win more world titles, and girls.
Nice one, mate. Well, thanks so much, and always appreciate your time, and hopefully catch up soon.
Thanks, Joe.